The summer of 1987 was officially at an end, but for me, life was just beginning. I had a ticket to a gig, which was at a venue in a suburb that I'd never set foot in before.
Kind of seemed like the ends of the earth. It was sort of on the darker south side, a place where I hadn't ventured very much.
The rugby club, Brisbane, the deep north.
I must have looked like this new kid in town, fresh out of school, and at 17, I really shouldn't have been there. And upon arriving at this place, I felt like I was stepping through this doorway into a whole new world.
I guess for an atheist, it's the closest thing you can have to a religious experience.
And it was a world of music and subcultures and politics, and it was all happening within one room. I wasn't sure of what lay ahead, but I knew very early on that night that that was exactly where I needed to be.
There's some places where when you go on stage, the audience make the noise that they're supposed to make when you come off stage. And when that happens, you know you're in for a really great night.
Ready, I'll start, mate. Oh, thank you very much. If you can keep the disco turned off and the lights turned on so I can see where the fucking hell I am. It's a very high stage tonight. And those slick bastards in Sydney want me back tomorrow, so we should have some fun here tonight.
This is From A to Triple Z, an original 4ZZZ podcast series diving into the station's archives to explore the patchwork past, cultural significance and incredible stories of Brisbane community radio 4ZZZ. I'm Kristen Black, and this episode is about one very special night where a three-way friendship was forged between a city, a singer and a station. For those of us who were there, we didn't realise that those 2 hours were about to change our lives, and that this concert would be forever a part of 4ZZZ history. It was the start of 1987, and I felt like my life was finally beginning. I just left a conservative all-girls school, and not a moment too soon. I was ready for a completely new chapter in politics, in music, and in life. Brisbane in 1987 was still a big country town, and it was the capital of the deep north to our southern cousins.
The boys in blue are everywhere.
The hot Brisbane climate was stifling, and in more ways than one, because Conservative politics had this ironclad grip on the state. Joe was elected to office exactly 1 year before I came along, and he was the only Premier I'd ever known. He was deified by some, despised by others, but it was hard to imagine a Queensland without Joe, Flo and their Nationals. I remember watching a music program featuring a young English singer-songwriter playing his electric guitar. The song was sad, and it told the story of a young woman who had a broken heart, body and dreams. But he was so different. He was a storyteller, a bit like a busker, and he had very clever lyrics and not your average voice. I watched his hands so closely as he moved up and down the neck of his fretboard. It was an epiphany for me as I was given my first lesson in bar chords, and the song was Levi Stubbs' Tears.
With the money from her accident, she bought herself a mobile home, so at least she could get some enjoyment out of being alone.
I could never have imagined that I'd have the chance to say thank you to Billy some 33 years later.
Everything's going. Would you like me to give some level for you to mess with there? 'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves and the mome raths outgave. Beware the jabberwock, my son. All good?
Levi Stubbs' tears run down his face.
Brisbane is or was to us, it's not now because I've been there many times, but it was a very strange place to come to. It was my first trip to Australia. I think the support from radio stations like 4ZZZ had managed to sort of drum up some interest in me coming. And as far as I was concerned, all I knew I was going into the deep north. And it seemed to me the place that had the closest similarity with what we were facing with Margaret Thatcher in the UK was Queensland with Joe Bjelke-Petersen. He seemed to be the equivalent of Margaret Thatcher, that kind of hardcore, conservative, trying to take things back to how they were in the 1950s, anti-liberty. So it seemed to me that Queensland was the place where perhaps what I was saying would have the most resonance.
Someone described Queensland to me as Thatcherism where the sun shines. I shouldn't think the sunshine makes up for anything. I shouldn't believe it doesn't at home.
He really had that kind of rallying cry, that ability to really kind of galvanise an audience and have the total room in the palm of his hand.
Jeff Wilson is affectionately known as a fucking saddo. It's a nickname Billy's given his most die-hard fans, which gives us some idea of the extent of Jeff's adoration. Jeff used to catch my school bus in 1982, and through moving in Brisbane music circles, we crossed paths again. He has that "where were you when" moment that he first heard Billy Bragg.
Yeah, okay, Triple Z gets all the credit for that. Life's Alright came out in 1983, which was the year that I started to learn guitar. And just one night, I heard Billy on the radio. I heard this, well, I didn't know who it was. I heard this crazy, not very good singer playing not very good guitar, and it was totally inspirational.
I was 21 years when I wrote this song. I'm 22 now, but I won't be for long. People ask me, when will you grow up to be a man? But all the girls I loved at school are already pushing prams.
And here you are, being a hack guitarist, hearing this person who's not really sounding that much better than you are in your bedroom in Brisbane, and he's from England, and you're hearing him on the radio here.
I don't want to change the world. I'm not looking for a New England. I'm just looking for another girl.
So I've got this really clear memory of the room that I was sitting in when I heard it, and I must have been sitting there doing uni work. It was my first year of uni. And hearing this and going, wow, I could actually, my crap guitar playing could actually end up having me played on the radio in a foreign country. So Triple Z gets all the credit for that.
4ZZZ had been providing an alternative voice to Joe's regime for 12 years by this stage, and at times it was the only thing that kept us sane. The station was already opening my ears and my mind to music and ideas I hadn't found anywhere else. It was up against so much, and it had my full attention.
And then, of course, the first time that he comes here, first couple of times that he comes here, Triple Z presents the shows. So there's this beautiful connection for me between Triple Z and Billy.
Yeah, and Billy and Triple Z.
And Billy and Triple Z, that's right, yeah. The first couple of times that he came out here, he subscribed to the station. He was one of the very first international subscribers. So, yeah, great connection.
East Leagues Club was an unlikely venue out in the suburbs. I had no idea where I was, and I recall getting lost. I wound up in some back street and had to get out the Refidex. 4ZZZ often put on shows at Easts. This show, however, was extra special. Radiothon, the station's subscriber drive and annual fundraiser, was into its third and final day.
I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and supporting this fundraiser for 4ZZZ. They need all the help and support they can get. This show has been recorded for broadcast on that radio station, so shout and clap and stomp and hear yourself on the radio. It's big fun. That's me, Mum.
There's very few performers who you can sit in front of in a crowd of several hundred and feel as though they're speaking directly to you.
David McGarity first encountered Billy Bragg in the true deep north of Queensland in the Townsville suburb of Woolgaroo.
It's not a place where many songs get written or...
And it was at parties during the late 1980s that I recall David entertaining us with a guitar in hand, and the songs were always Billy Bragg's.
Well, I'd moved down from Townsville to go to uni. I was in first year of uni studying drama, and I couldn't believe he was coming to town. I got tickets in whatever way I did, probably from Rocking Horse or somewhere like that. And to me, East Leagues Club kind of seemed like the ends of the earth. It was sort of on the darker south side, a place where I hadn't ventured very much. I can't even remember how I got there. There was a bit of lining up outside. I went with my good friend Susan, a woman who I later married.
Means I love you.
And the concert was pretty wild. You know, I'd never seen him play live before. And we are talking about 1987, pre-YouTube. You know, if I wanted a Billy Bragg record, I'd have to wait for it to be released and get it or tape it off a friend. And Susan recalls a skinhead standing in front of her. She was displeased about that. So we shifted to being quite close to the front.
I remember standing on a table to catch a glimpse of the stage. The room was packed, and every subculture known to 1987 Brisbane was there. Swampies and greenies rubbed shoulders with rude boys and girls. The two supports were local bands, Wondrous Fair, a new and artistic group, and ska favourites, Furious Turtles. The diverse lineup spoke to Billy's widespread appeal.
It wasn't like a normal Billy Bragg audience. Something else was going on there. Right. And initially, you think when you walk out and you see them all like that, there's some places where when you go on stage, the audience make the noise that they're supposed to make when you come off stage. And when that happens, you know you're in for a really great night, you know. Yeah. Kind of like the audience, it means the audience are already fired up, and they're not just like really pleased to see you, Bill. It means they're really fired up, and then they themselves have already got to a level that you might take, 20 minutes to wind them up to. If you play the right songs and say the right things, you might be able to get them up to that level, and then, in the last half hour of the set, you're banging them with the, hitting them with the bangers, and finally you let loose with New England, go over the top, and it's all done. They've took them over the top. When you walk out on stage and they've already gone over the top, you then got to think to yourself, okay, I'm going to have to make sure I keep on top of this, because this gig could run away with me. Wow. This gig could really run away with me. And it doesn't often happen. Yeah. And the first few times it had happened, it can be a little bit scary. But by the time I got to Brisbane, I'd kind of understood it. And what it did was it upturned all my preconceptions about what the show would be like. The rugby club, Brisbane, the deep north, all that kind of stuff was upended by an audience that was incredibly enthusiastic for what I was bringing.
This was not your average Sunday night in Brisbane, and there was one moment that changed everything. Only 2 songs in, this happens.
What a nice city. He's over there, mate. What a nice city you have here. We've been grooving out because your fame as Queenslanders is spread far and wide, I was in Sydney yesterday, wandering round Paddington, and I saw a bumper sticker on a car that said Sir Joe for PM. Fortunately, this was on the bumper sticker of a Volkswagen Beetle. But I'm saying fortunately because it only took 3 of us to turn the fucking thing over and knock it in the street.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I would say. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like that's what you want to do. You want to make that connection with people. It's absolutely crucial, because if you can make people smile, if you make people laugh, when the politics comes, it comes like an arm around the shoulder rather than a punch in the gut.
The upending of the unsuspecting, Joe-loving Beatle became a metaphor for what we wanted to happen to the entire Bjelke-Petersen regime.
It was a little like being at a political rally.
This was the conversation we'd waited 20 years to have, and it took a singer from the opposite end of the earth to start it.
And Billy talks a lot about the parallels between our Joe era and the Thatcher years that he was living through at the time. And it was a real kind of like, those the sort of the town hall meetings that you hear about where, people are thumping the desk and all that kind of stuff. But he's got this real kind of statesman-like quality, even back then, of being able to bring a group of people together and send them in a, have that direction.
Through his banter between songs, Billy held our hands tight that night, and we were waking up.
When you were in the audience, I don't know how you said, how old were you?
I was 17.
Yeah, you're in a room with all these politically charged up people. I don't know what your experience was, but you may never have been in a room like that before. You may never have been in a room to see a load of people singing There Is Power in the Union at the top of their voices. And what I want is for you to go away and everybody else to go away feeling the same way that I feel when I see an audience react like that, which is that I'm not the only person who gives a shit about this stuff. That there are other people out there who care.
We have a word for Sancho, and the word we have is no. We have a word for Sergio, and a word for Lady Flo. I say, are you listening, Sergio? We have a word.
But it's more important for you because you live in this town. The next day, I'm in another town, laying that same trip on another audience. I'm gone. but you're still there, and you take away from that night a small nugget of solidarity that there's a room full of people in Brisbane who give a shit about this stuff. You are not alone.
After 23 songs and 2 encores, Billy challenges every person in the room to take a stand against our very own version of Thatcher's Tories.
The thing that worries me most, is the way he says to people, just leave it to me. Don't you worry about that. We'll take care of that. God will speak to me. Lady Flo will speak to me. Sonny Jim will speak to me. And you look into those watery, misty blue eyes, and you know what that man is planning. You of all people know what that man is planning. You people here in Brisbane, you know what that man is planning. Are you going to let the rest of Australia be fooled into electing him Prime Minister? Are you going to let the rest of those people living free thinking?
And that's the power that music has. Not the power to create change, but the power to inspire people, to give people that momentary sense of solidarity, whether it's political or emotional.
So I say unto you, what are you going to do? And what are you and you and you and you and you and you going to do? I say organize, or this country will pay the price. I say organize, or this country will pay the price. Don't wait for someone to just vote him down. Don't wait for him to get fed up or for him to just think, oh, well, I've had enough, because he won't. Because he thinks he's on a mission. You know that. You know that. He's on a mission to make the rest of this country a mini South Africa. To make the rest of this country a police state. To make the rest of this country just like Cairns, just like Cape York, just like Brisbane. He has a plan, that man.
In that particular case, on that particular night, what I was doing at the end there was really about trying to fire up, reflect back onto the audience the activism that I was experiencing from that audience, and reflect it back onto them so that they took away, because they left with their activism supercharged, because I left with my activism supercharged after that gig.
And stand down, Margaret. Said Joe, you know where we want you to go.
When you go to somewhere like Queensland, or some in the time of Sir Joe Bjelke-Petersen, because so few left-wing performers come, every radical from miles around turns up. They turn up and they're really fired up for what you're bringing. They really want it. In Brisbane, everything seemed to be turned up to 11. It was one of those few places where I experienced what we laughingly refer to as Bragg mania. And that's the thing that, where you kind of lose control of the audience a bit. And you go away and you think, okay, that's Brisbane. You remember every time you come back, you remember that. You remember the energy of the people, that they were so pleased to see you, that they went. I mean, people are always pleased to see you when you come to town. They bought a ticket. They're really pleased you're up on stage. They really love what you do. You come at the T-shirt store off, we shake your hand. They're really pleased to see you. But there are some places where it goes beyond that, and you realise that it's something as a much. There's beyond the excitement. There's a real kind of connection there, and I think Brisbane has always had that feeling.
There is power in the factory, power in the line, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in a union, and the lessons of the past will learn with workers' blood. The mistakes of the bosses we must pay for.
How many musicians will tour a country and not know anything about it apart from the hotel rooms they stay in, and he really makes the effort to understand where he's going and what's going on, what the political climate is like. And I think he could see that Triple Z was a kindred spirit in terms of the way that we had passion about the state that we were in, that on two levels. The position that Triple Z took, the political stance that Triple Z had, and the fact that Triple Z was so passionate about its ideals. And I think that he saw that kind of kindred spirit between him and the radio station. And as I said, he was a subscriber for a number of years. He had that connection and he cared. So I think that he really got that connection of that shared passion about ideologies that were important that he had, that Triple Z reflected as well.
I think it's the very least I should be able to do after the support you've shown me, because, you can guarantee there was nobody else in Queensland playing my records in 1987. I'm totally aware of that.
At the end, it was pretty clear he was going to hang around and talk to people after the show.
That's how I found out about what was happening in Queensland, doing that in Sydney. People telling me about, because, that's where you find out, because all the things you've talked about politics, people are psyched up about politics. They want to come and tell you what's going on. And I would have learned that from sitting on the stage talking to people after the show. That's how else would I learn? How else would I get that perspective? It's absolutely critical, and still is, because that, I still try and do that when I can. And I still learn stuff that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. So it's a crucial part of what I do.
And there was a few other urges like me kind of hanging around at the end of the show, and they were actually getting stuff signed. They had handbills, or maybe some of them had been enterprising enough to bring records, but I didn't have anything. I just had a shirt, my white shirt that I was wearing, so I got him to sign my shirt with the Nico he had. And then I wore it very, very proudly to uni the next day or the next few days, and my friends at uni thought that I'd done it myself, which is very cute. It probably speaks to the idea of they knew how enthusiastic I was about Billy. Yeah. I'd fake something like that.
Stephen McKerris from Support Act Wondrous Fair remembers having a chat to Billy.
But maybe what's more important is that I went and said hello to his manager, Ian Thompson, and I said to him, look, we need a manager and we need a record contract. We want to release our music in England. And he just sort of laughed, but he did give me an address. And Wondrous Fair, we were very interested in new instruments and making new sounds, and we had these plastic whirlies. So I sent one of those in a big box along with a demo tape.
We didn't know it then, but the winds of change were starting to blow. Months prior to the concert, investigative journalists were already uncovering the extent of the corruption of Joe's government and the abusive powers handed to the Queensland Police Force.
After that 87 gig, really, in 1988, we saw a lot of changes here in Queensland. So Joe was not Premier anymore. His own party had
listen, I take no credit for that, but, as soon as I turn up, house came down like a house of cards. I'm saying nothing. I'm just sitting back here and smiling.
Joe was not going to Canberra. He was going back to Kingaroy. You can hear more about Joe's downfall in the first episode of this podcast, about the tireless 4ZZZ journalists bent on exposing the murky underbelly of Queensland politics. While Joe was back in Bethany, conservatism had found its way into the student union at 4ZZZ's birthplace, the University of Queensland. After a brief stint in Toowong, the station was looking for a place they could call home.
Fast forward another 18 months and we were homeless. There were broadcasting from the transmitters up at Mount Cootha, and then we had to find another temporary home. And you're back at East Leagues Club playing a fundraiser at our market day for 4ZZZ. So your support for the station in all of its highs and lows was really evident. So thank you for coming back.
I think it's the very least I should be able to do. So, you're responsible for what putting Brisbane on the map for. And to be able to come back still and see you, it's kind of, we've been through a lot together and we're still here. you're still interested in talking to old geezers like me, who perhaps don't threaten the charts as much, or never really did. So it's not just me who's still around and pleased about that, but I think you should be proud of that as well. 4ZZZ should be proud of that as well for hanging in there and still playing music that's outside of the comfort zone for a lot of people.
This podcast was produced across the lands of the Turrbal, Jagera, Yagara and Yugambeh people, and we acknowledge that sovereignty over these lands was never ceded. This episode was produced by me, Kristen Black. I'm a volunteer at 4ZZZ and I host the show Heyday. You can listen to it online at 4ZZZ.org.au. Executive producers are Grace Pashley and Max Rowley. Sound design and theme production by Lucy McAfee. I'd like to personally thank Billy for his generosity in sharing his memories from the performance, for his enduring friendship with 4ZZZ, and for teaching me bar chords all those years ago. Thanks to David, Jeff and Stephen for sharing your memories. To Brisbane bands The Parameters and Wondrous Fair, thanks for teleporting us back to the 80s airwaves on Z. Go look them up and support independent artists. To the 4ZZZ tech crew who recorded and broadcast the gig, and the volunteers who did a ton of archiving work in 2010, digitising reels and reels of tape kept in the basement filing cabinets of 4ZZZ. We are eternally grateful. Make sure you subscribe to From A to Triple Z so you can get updates every time we release an episode. We've got a few coming out early next year too. This podcast has been produced to tell some of our stories for our 45th birthday. If you like what you hear and want to support community radio for another 4 decades, you can head to 4ZZZ.org.au or visit the links in the show notes to make a donation, buy some limited edition merch, or even subscribe.
See you next time. See ya.
If you're falling, I'll put out my hands. If you feel bitter, understand. I love you. I'm the milkman of human kindness only. An extra pint. It's just on for all you sperm donors in the audience.